Edgewood University. A paranormal romance written by Tanya Grice. Year 1. Episode 4. Connection. Connections are made with everyone who crosses your path. It's up to you to make that bond or keep moving forward. Layla sighed, shaking her head. No, and I'm not sure I want to tell them. I've already shown them how much of a nutcase I am, and I don't want them to think I've gone completely insane. Bailey snickered, and Cassidy looked at Layla with big eyes. You were born a Monday. It's going to take some time to believe this is all real, she said, and Layla breathed, opening another bag. I'm trying to wrap my head around this stuff, but that doesn't change the fact that I feel like I've gone insane, she said, and the girls laughed. You have a strong connection with Tyler. You didn't know he was supernatural? Asked Bailey, and Layla looked at her in disbelief. Besides the display in the hallway, how did the girl know she and Tyler had a deep connection? She didn't tell them how she knew him and forgot his mother had hinted they knew each other out of school. How'd you know that? I've known you for 5 minutes? Cassidy snickered, and Bailey grinned, making her eyes glow bright purple. I'm a mind fairy. I can feel others' emotions. You're angry with Tyler, but you love him and will forgive him eventually. You practically lived at a mundane home for 10 years, said Cassidy, and Layla threw her hands in the air. That explains it. Along with losing my mind, I've also lost my memory. Cassidy studied Layla momentarily and inhaled a sharp breath. So, you and I were close? She asked, and Layla shook her head. Tyler and I grew up together in Mortar, and about 5 years ago, after I was attacked, he and his parents disappeared, she explained. And you found each other. Sounds a bit romantic to me. Bailey sighed. Layla looked at the girl and snorted. Me and Tyler? Romantic? She laughed, and the girls looked at her oddly. Sorry, girls. My parents lied to me and told me he was dead. Tyler and his parents lied to me all his life and didn't contact me, making me believe I lost the most significant piece of my life. I mourned his death for months and blamed myself for it. Cassidy and Bailey walked toward her and sat on the bed. They looked at her with concern, and Layla sighed, folding a shirt. Why would his death have been your fault? Asked Cassidy, grabbing and folding a shirt. Bailey grabbed a couple of pairs of leggings and folded them in a neat pile. Because it was my idea to go explore the woods that night. We were 12, for heaven's sake. She breathed. Layla stared at her hand with orange-red glowing eyes, and a flame danced in her palm. She watched her hand ignite and moved her fingers inside the red, orange, and yellow magic. Layla, said Cassidy softly, and placed her hand on her arm. Layla felt a calming sensation wash over her body as the flames disappeared and her eyes faded. She inhaled a deep breath, feeling more relaxed, and she and Bailey stared at Cassidy. The girl removed her hand, and the sensation disappeared, leaving Layla calmer. How'd you do that? Asked Layla, and Cassidy smiled. It was right. Hellcats and banshees make great companions, said Bailey with glowing purple eyes, and Cassidy and Layla looked at each other. I think we are going to be great friends, said Cassidy, and Bailey grinned. Why didn't you tell me she was coming, let alone put her with my ex-girlfriend? Exclaimed Tyler, rubbing his face, and his mother gave her son a thoughtful look. I didn't think she would come, but she did. I didn't want you to go through that heartache all over again if she didn't. Hellcats are very unpredictable in the transformation phase, and about Cassidy. Layla is a Hellcat, and Cassidy is a banshee. She can calm the beast inside lie and make the transition smoother and less painful. Celine and Daniel told her, you died the night of the attack. Could you imagine what would have gone through her mind if she saw you before I could explain? Tyler sighed and nodded. I know, she told me. Do her parents know what she is? He asked, and his mother shook her head. No, and it's best that way. The girl already thinks she's insane and dreaming. Maya sighed, leaning on her desk. He sighed and gave her a determined look. Then I will figure out a way to convince her. I've known her for a long time, so I will find something I can use, he said. Convince who? Asked Peter, walking into the office, and Tyler looked at his father. Our newest student, Layla Holland, said Maya, and Peter looked at her oddly. Layla? Tyler's Layla? He asked, and Tyler and Maya nodded. The mundane girl that Jeffrey bit? They nodded again, and Peter creased his brow. What is she doing here? She shouldn't have turned. Dad, Layla's a hellcat. Peter looked at his son in disbelief and grinned. Fascinating. There hasn't been one in centuries. He murmured, lost in his thoughts, and Tyler snapped his fingers. Dad? Peter looked at his boy and grinned, shaking his head. So, how did it go when you two saw each other again? He asked, and Tyler growled, holding his jaw. She punched me in the face. How do you think it went? His father laughed, and Maya straightened. I wouldn't be laughing too much. Lay is quite pissed at us, so don't be surprised if you get punched in the face next, said Tyler, and Peter laughed harder. Me? Why would she be mad at me? I'm daddy number 2, as she puts it, because her parents told her I was dead, and you took me away from her. Peter looked at his wife and son in disbelief, and they nodded. Suddenly, Peter's head snapped toward Tyler as his smile faded and his expression hardened. You must make amends as soon as possible and help her understand her power. Tyler's eyebrows shot down in anger, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. What do you think I've been doing ever since she punched me in the face? I may have weaseled my way in a little, but she demoted me, and now I have to do everything I can to get back into best friend status. But if I can't, and this whole thing screws up our friendship, what then? Peter looked at the floor, sighed heavily, and pressed his lips together. Then you will leave me no choice but to send the Hellcat back where she belongs. I've seen what happens when a Hellcat lets their anger consume them, and trust me, son, you don't want that happening to Edgewood, he said, and his wife agreed. Come on, I want to show you something, said Bailey, grabbing Layla's hand, and Cassidy giggled. Since you're having a hard time believing our world, maybe this will open your eyes, said Cassidy. Bailey, Cassidy, and Layla laughed, running through the school and across the schoolyard. Layla was feeling better, knowing she made friends already, and she let her guard down. They stopped at the forest edge, and Layla's eyes widened. The moonlight shined brightly on a large, tall oak tree in the forest, making the land look like a sparkling, magical, hidden world, and she smiled at the beautiful sight. It's beautiful, whispered Layla. Bailey and Cassidy giggled, gave each other a knowing look, and smirked. Watch this, said Cassidy, pointing to Bailey, and Layla watched. The girl stepped onto a rock, jumped into the air, and spun slowly as she raised her hands, lifting higher. Bright, purple, shimmering ribbons of magic circled her body, and beautiful purple flaming wings shot from her back. Layla gasped, watching tiny, colorful fairies dance around the tree in her, Bailey, and Cassidy. Layla held up her hand, and 3 tiny fairies landed on her fingers. She giggled as they bowed, and she bowed. They flew off and joined their friends, and she sighed happily. Cassidy squeezed her forearm, leaped into the air, and spun with the fairies. Layla's eyes widened, watching Cassidy's hair turn black with white streaks and her eyes glow white. Layla laughed as tears rolled down her cheeks and watched her new friends float with the fairies. Now, do you still think this is a dream? Asked Cassidy. If this is a dream, I don't want it ever to stop. She chuckled, half crying. Bailey smiled with glowing purple eyes and held out her hand. Now it's your turn, she said softly. Layla's smile faded, and she took a step back. It's okay. I like watching, she said nervously, biting her cuticle. Bailey and Cassidy looked at each other, and Cassidy held out her hand. You will be okay. Take my hand too. We've got you, she said, smiling, and Layla swallowed hard. You can do this, encouraged Bailey, and Layla shook her head. I'm not a fairy or a banshee. I don't have wings. I can't fly, she said, backing away, and gasped as she bumped into a broad chest behind her. Layla froze, feeling someone's hot breath on her skin in the rise and fall of the chest against her back. Sure you can, whispered a soft voice. Clear your mind. Feel the magic of the land and take it. It's yours to take. She felt warm, strong hands on her arms and started to relax. Close your eyes and let me guide you, whispered the voice. She closed her eyes, picturing Tyler behind her, and felt a rush of power course through her veins. A hand grabbed Layla's, pulling her forward, and the warm hand slipped away. She felt weightless and free, She opened her eyes and found herself twirling in the air with Bailey, Cassidy, and the tiny fairies. Suddenly, Layla rose higher in the air, and orange-red, shimmering magic ribbons circled her arms and legs. She watched with wide eyes as the magic swirled around her body, and she arched her back as she felt a powerful rush of magic ignite her soul. Broad, sizable, flaming orange, yellow, and red wings grew from her shoulder blades, and the girls heard someone gasp. Bailey and Cassidy looked at the ground, and their eyes widened. It was Mr. Tate, Tyler's father, who helped Layla. "Mr. Tate?" exclaimed Bailey, and Layla looked down. Anger boiled inside, and she landed on the ground, glaring at him with crimson eyes. Peter gasped, staring at her in shock and backing away slowly. "How is that possible? You're just not a Hellcat? You're an Alpha? And the Dragon Spark?" he exclaimed, and Layla growled. Bailey and Cassidy landed on the ground, and the shimmering, tiny fairies disappeared. "Tyler?" Tyler shook his head and rubbed his face. He was in his room with his best friend Cody and must have dozed off. Cody Lancer, tall and muscular with short bleached hair and blue eyes. He was a beta for the Lancer pack who hung out on the edge of town, and he and Tyler became close over the years. Tyler rubbed his eyes and looked at Cody in question. "What's up, dude?" he asked, yawning. "Check this out," said Cody, pointing out the window. Tyler got up from his chair and walked toward the window. He smiled, seeing Bailey and Cassidy dance with the fairies, and then his smile faded when he saw his father with Layla. He watched as he put his hands on her arms and led her toward her roommates. "What is he doing?" Tyler asked, and Cody shrugged. "Beats me. I've never understood your father," he said, and he and Tyler snickered. Cody wasn't fond of his father, but what baffled Tyler was that Cody didn't like his mother. He said something was off about her and couldn't figure out why he felt that way. They watched Layla twirl with the fairies, extending bright, fiery dragon wings, and their eyes widened. The guys looked at each other and swallowed hard. The supernatural world knew a story about an ancient being that would only surface when needed, and that creature was called the Hellcat Dragon Spark. Tyler never believed it until now. The ancient Hellcat Dragon Spark was his best friend, and the stories were true. He smiled proudly, but his smile faded when he saw Layla land in front of his father. He glanced at Cody, frowned, and, without a word, ran out of the room.